I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. At first, I thought it was the cat knocking over the water jar in the kitchen, but then I heard Osvaldo's voice in the yard. He was shouting something, the words a drunken mess, but the tone was aggressive. I glanced at the clock. It was 2 in the morning. I got out of bed and went to the window. A streetlight was burning in Arturo's neighbor's yard, and I saw Osvaldo swaying on his feet in the middle of the street. He had another rock in his hand. The window in Arturo's house was broken, the shards glittering on the ground under the yellow light of the street lamp. "Osvaldo!" I shouted from the window. "What are you doing?" He turned around, looked at me with cloudy eyes, and laughed. He had the same drunken smile I'd known since he was 18, satisfied and cruel at the same time. It was the smile that always appeared when he got so drunk that he didn't realize the consequences of his actions. "Mom, go to bed," he said, swaying from side to side. "I'm talking to the neighbor. I'm talking to the neighbor." At that moment, the owner himself came out of Arturo's house. Arturo Medina worked as a mechanic at the bus station, a man of few words, but now his face was red with anger. He was wearing home shorts and a laundered t-shirt, barefoot. He must have jumped out of bed when he heard the sound of breaking glass. "What are you doing, you idiot?" Arturo approached Osvaldo, ignoring the sharp shards under his feet. "This is the second window in a month. My family's asleep." "Don't you yell at me!" Osvaldo stepped forward, swaying and waving the stone. "Your damn music's been blaring all night, keeping me awake. You think I can't hear it?" "What music, you fool?" Arturo was clearly out of his mind. "I've been asleep for 2 hours. My wife and child are asleep. What music?" I quickly threw on my robe and ran out into the courtyard. My bare feet immediately felt the cold concrete and small stones. The night air was cool, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Osvaldo had already grabbed Arturo by his shirt, and he tried to push him away. "Osvaldo, let him go!" I ran toward them, feeling my heart pounding. "Let go now!" "Stay out of this, Mom." He kept his angry gaze on Arturo. "We're having a man-to-man conversation here. We're having a man-to-man conversation." "What man-to-man talk?" I tried to unclench his fingers. "You're drunk out of your mind. Let go of my neighbor." Arturo tried to free himself, but Osvaldo was stronger, despite his drunken instability. He had boxed when he was young and still had strength in his arms. They began to push, and I realized that a real fight was about to break out. "Arturo, please." I stepped between them with my arms spread. "He's drunk. Don't mess with him. I'll pay for everything, as always. I'll pay for the glass tomorrow." "Patricia," Arturo was breathing heavily, trying to calm down. "I can't live like this anymore. Every weekend it's the same thing. He's playing music in the street at 3 in the morning. He's fighting with someone right under our windows. He's throwing rocks at houses. I have a little boy. He wakes up from the noise and cries half the night." Osvaldo suddenly let go of Arturo and looked at me with contempt. There was something cold, detached in his eyes. "Are you going to apologize for me again?" He shook his head and grinned. "How can you apologize for a little kid? I'm a grown man. I'll take care of my own affairs." "You're a drunk man," I corrected him, trying to speak calmly. "And you broke your neighbor's window. Go home before it gets worse." "Don't tell me how to live my life." Osvaldo raised his voice, and his face contorted with anger. "I'm in my own yard. I do what I want. Understand? My yard, my rules." The windows in the neighboring houses began to light up. I saw old Rosalia peeking out from behind the curtain, and on the other side appeared the silhouette of Don Ricardo. "The whole neighborhood will be awake tomorrow to discuss our shame." "Osvaldo, please." I took his hand, which was hot and sticky with sweat. "Let's go home. We'll talk in the morning when you're sober." He looked at me, then at Arturo, who stood with his fists clenched and breathing heavily. I guess the alcohol was starting to wear off, because there was something in his eyes that looked like he understood the situation. Or maybe it was just fatigue taking over. "Okay." He shrugged and threw the stone to the ground. "Let's go. And you," he pointed a finger in Arturo's direction, "keep the music down. And shut your dog up. He's been howling all night." "I don't have any music at all," Arturo shouted after us. "And the dog isn't mine. You're out of your mind." I walked Osvaldo to the porch of our house. He was barely able to stand, clinging to the railing that my husband had painted 10 years before he died. The paint was peeling, but there was nothing to replace it with. The smell of alcohol from his son was so strong it made me dizzy. A mixture of cheap rum, beer, and something else nauseating. Where did you get so drunk? I asked as we entered the house, and I turned on the light in the hallway. It was Pablito's birthday. He slumped into the old leather chair in the living room, which creaked under his weight. Or a wedding. I don't remember now. Herman was there too, and Carlos and that new guy, what's his name, Fernando. Osvaldo, you have to work tomorrow. What work? He laughed, and I found it particularly unpleasant. Foreman said he wasn't needed yet. Construction's frozen until better times. That was news to me. Osvaldo had been working on an apartment complex on the outskirts of town for 6 months. It wasn't a steady job, it didn't pay much, but it brought in some money. It was enough to buy him food and drink, and I paid the rest out of my paycheck. When did he say that? Yesterday, or the day before. He rubbed his face with his hands. He said that the customer had no money, that there was a crisis, that when the money came in, he'd call then. When will that be? How do I know? Maybe in a month, maybe in 6 months, maybe never. I looked at my son. His face was puffy and gray, his eyes red and inflamed, dried drops of something brown on his chin, either coffee or vomit. His t-shirt was dirty and stained, his jeans too. In his 25 years, he looked 35, sometimes 40. Go wash up and go to bed, I said tiredly. We'll talk tomorrow. Talk about what? He got up from his chair, swayed, and grabbed the backrest. No work, no money, no life. What is there to talk about? That we can't live like this. That something has to change. Change what? He looked at me with a grin. Mom, I'm 25 years old, no education, no specialty. Who needs me? I can only work on a construction site, and that's when there's a construction site. He went to the bathroom, and I heard him making noise with the water, dropping something, cursing under his nose. I stayed in the living room listening to these sounds and thinking about what was happening to my family. It was quiet outside the window. The neighbors had quieted down, and there was music playing somewhere far away, probably from a bar in the main square. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, bathroom. My husband and I had bought it 20 years ago, when the kids were small. At the time, it seemed like enough space for a lifetime. My husband dreamed of adding another room, making a bigger kitchen, but he didn't have time. He died of a heart attack 7 years ago, leaving me alone with 2 sons. In the morning, I got up at 7:30 as usual. I had to work at school from 8 in the morning, and it was a half-hour walk to get there. Osvaldo was still asleep in his room. The door closed. There was heavy sniffling coming from behind the door. I had breakfast alone, coffee with milk and a piece of bread with margarine. There wasn't enough money for butter and cheese, and the cleaning lady's salary was small. But the work was honest and stable, which could not be said about the earnings of her sons. At school, the day passed as usual. I washed the floors in the classrooms, wiped the blackboards, cleaned the teacher's lounge. The work was simple but physically hard. By the end of the day, my back was aching, my legs were aching, but I did not complain. At my age, it was almost impossible to find another job. The school principal, Senora Mercedes, was a strict but fair woman. She knew about my family problems and sometimes let me leave early if something serious happened at home. The teachers treated me well too, sometimes buying me lunch or bringing me things I no longer wore. I got home at 4 in the afternoon. Osvaldo was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, and he looked terrible. His face was gray, his hands were shaking, his eyes were inflamed. He was wearing the same dirty t-shirt as yesterday. How's the head? I asked, setting my bag on the table. It's fine. He didn't look up. Mom, do you have some money? I need to pay a debt urgently. What debt? Pablito lent it to me last night for a drink. He promised to pay me back today, but he's in trouble. If I don't pay him back, he'll never lend again. I sighed. This debt talk happened every week. Pablito, Herman, or one of his drinking buddies borrowed money that had to be paid back immediately. How much? 20,000. That was almost a third of my weekly paycheck. I opened my wallet, took out the crumpled bills, and put them on the table. This is the last time, I said, even though I knew I wasn't telling the truth. Sure, Mom, I won't ask again. I'll get a job and earn my own money. We both knew that wasn't true either. We had these conversations every month, and each time I believed that this time would be different. That evening, as I was preparing a dinner of rice and chicken, the cheapest food I could buy, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw Dalila, Emiliano's wife. She stood on the threshold with tears in her eyes, wearing a simple blue dress and old sandals. Her left cheek was swollen and there was a fresh, dark purple bruise under her eye. Aunt Patricia, she sobbed, wiping her nose with her sleeve. Can I come in? Of course, baby. I stepped aside and hugged her. What happened? Who did that to you? Dalila walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. She was a good girl, married to Emiliano 3 years ago at St. Jose's church. She was ruddy and cheerful then, always smiling, loved to sing. Worked in Senora Rosita's laundry, modest, quiet. The kind of woman who never raises her voice and always apologizes, even when not guilty. Emiliano came home drunk last night, she said without looking at me, looking at her hands. He started yelling that there was no money, that the job was bad, that life was bad. Then he said it was all because of me, that I was bringing bad luck into the house. I sat down next to her on the couch. The black eye wasn't the only one. There were dark spots on her neck too, like fingerprints. Did he choke you? He pushed me first. Dalila touched her cheek. I fell and hit the corner of the table, and then he got mad and started hitting me, yelling that I didn't understand him, that I was a bad wife. My heart sank. Emiliano had always been more aggressive than Osvaldo, more violent, but I didn't think it would come to violence. As a child, he was a gentle boy, loved animals, cried when he saw someone hurting kittens. And then what happened? Then he left, slammed the door. He came back in the morning, even drunker than he was. He went to sleep on the couch without undressing. In the afternoon, he woke up and started screaming again. Said he was fed up with me, that he was fed up with me, that he'd find another woman who wouldn't whine about nothing and could cook better than me. Dalila cried harder, and I could see her hands were trembling. She was frightened not only by the beatings, but also by the threats. Where is he now? I don't know. He left this morning and hasn't come back. He's probably out drinking with his friends again. Aunt Patricia, I can't live like this anymore. It's the same thing every day. He drinks, he fights, he spends all his money on alcohol. I'm afraid to go home. I'm afraid he'll kill me next time. And your parents? Can't you move in with them? My mom says I chose this husband myself, so I'll have to put up with him until the end. She says divorce is a sin, that I should pray and wait for my husband to come to his senses. And Dad hasn't spoken to me since he found out Emiliano lost his job at the workshop. What happened at the workshop? He got caught stealing tools and selling them. The owner didn't press charges but fired him immediately. That was 2 months ago, and he hasn't worked since. That was news to me, too. I thought Emiliano was still working as a mechanic at Don Enrique's auto shop. So he had been living without a steady income for 2 months now. We sat in silence. I didn't know what to say. Should I tell her to leave her husband? But where would she go? Working at the laundry brought in pennies, barely enough to rent a room, and her parents refused to support her. Maybe we should talk to Emiliano. I suggested it, even though I didn't think it would work. Explain to him that it was wrong? I tried. Dalila wiped her tears with her sleeve. He says it's my own fault, that if I was a better wife, cooked better, was prettier, he wouldn't drink. That I disappointed him, that he expected something different out of the marriage. What does he do when he's sober? He stays home and watches TV, or he'd go to a friend's house and play dominoes. He can't help at home. He says that's a woman's job. She won't even clean up her own plate. After Dalila left, and she stayed with me for almost 2 hours, telling me more and more details about her family life, I couldn't find a place for myself. I made soup from yesterday's leftover chicken, but I was constantly distracted by what was happening to my sons. Osvaldo was asleep in his room after last night's bender, and Emiliano was somewhere drinking and beating his wife. When I was their age, life seemed simple. My husband worked in a factory. I stayed at home with the children. We lived poorly but steadily. My sons went to school, played in the yard, helped with chores. I could not imagine that in 20 years they would turn into such people. The next day, after finishing my schoolwork, I stopped by Beatrice's grocery store. She had been my best friend for 20 years. We had met when our children were in the same grade. Beatrice was a practical woman, not sentimental, but always willing to listen and give advice. The store was small, with 2 halls, selling essential groceries and household goods. Beatrice had inherited it from her first husband and turned it into a profitable business. She was one of the few women in our neighborhood who lived on her own and didn't depend on anyone financially. Hi! She looked up when she saw me. Beatrice was behind the counter counting the day's sales. How's it going? Not good, I leaned against the counter, feeling my legs ache after a day's work. Not good at all, Beatrice. She put the money aside and looked at me carefully. Beatrice could read faces. She said she'd learned it from years of dealing with customers. Sons again? I told her about yesterday's incident with Osvaldo and the broken window, about the lost job at the construction site, about Dalila's visit with the black eye, about Emiliano's being out of work for 2 months and stealing. Beatrice listened in silence, sometimes shaking her head or clucking her tongue. What are you going to do? She asked when I had finished my long story. I don't know, I said. What can I do? They're grown men with their own lives. Grown men who live at your expense, Beatrice corrected me, and I could hear the irritation in her voice. Patricia, you've been patronizing them for too long. They are used to their mother to solve all the problems, to pay all the debts, to agree with all the neighbors. But they're my children. Children? Beatrice grinned and shook her head. Emiliano is married, 28 years old. Osvaldo is a grown man of 25. What kind of children are they? Kids don't beat their wives or break their neighbors' windows. I knew Beatrice was right, but I couldn't agree. How can a mother abandon her children, even if they are grown up and misbehaving? And if I don't help them, what then? I asked. They'd be lost. Maybe they will be lost, Beatrice shrugged. Or maybe they'll finally realize that it's time to grow up and take responsibility for their actions. Patricia, you're not helping them by supporting them. You're only making things worse for yourself and them. But how can I leave them? Not abandon them, but stop being their cash cow. Let them find their own jobs, pay for their own mistakes, solve their own problems. You're not helping them if you keep doing everything for them. At that moment, an elderly man in work clothes came into the store. He bought bread, milk, and cigarettes, paid, and left. Listen, Beatrice leaned over the counter toward me. Do you remember Martha who lived on Rue Libertad? The one with the 3 sons? Yeah, she had the exact same story. Her sons drank, didn't work, always asking for money. She denied herself everything to help them, and they just kept getting worse and worse. And what happened? She died of a heart attack at 50. You know what her sons did at her funeral? They were looking for where she hid the money. They thought she had some savings, but she didn't. She spent it all on them. That story shocked me. I knew Martha. She worked really hard and denied herself everything for her children. What about her sons now? 2 are in jail for stealing. The 3rd is a drunk. That's the result of a mother's love without boundaries. We talked some more, then I said goodbye to Beatrice and went home, pondering her words. Martha's story kept me on my toes. Was I following the same path? Was my helping my sons only hurting them? The next day, as I was getting ready for work, there was a knock at the door. It was still dark outside the window, and the clock read 7:30 in the morning. Who could have come at this hour? I opened the door and saw Emiliano with 2 worn-out gym bags in his hands. Hi, Mom, he said tiredly. Can I come in? Emiliano looked worse than usual. His face was gray, unshaven, his eyes inflamed. He was wearing a crumpled shirt he hadn't changed in days and stained jeans. Sure, come on in. I stepped aside. What's wrong? Delilah locked the locks. He strode into the living room and dropped the bags on the floor. She won't let me home. Says she can't take it anymore. And you're surprised? I sat across from him. You hit her. I didn't hit her. I slapped her. He waved his hand. Once, and that was because she drove me crazy. Emiliano, she has a black eye and fingerprints on her neck. She's exaggerating. He avoided my gaze. Women always exaggerate. A little push, and she tells it like I almost killed her. I looked at my eldest son and realized he didn't think he was guilty. There was no remorse in his voice, only resentment at being misunderstood. What are you going to do? Stay with you for a while. He finally looked at me. Just until she calms down. A week, maybe 2. Then I'll talk to her, explain to her that it's not right. Emiliano, I don't have enough space in my house. Osvaldo lives here now. Where will you all stay? I'll sleep on the couch. That's okay. Mom, it's not like I'm living on the street. There was a familiar note in his voice, the same one he used to use as a child when he wanted something from his parents. Compassionate, a little cranky. Will you be looking for a job? What kind of job? He grinned. Mom, you know how it is with jobs these days. Everywhere you need connections or education. What do I have? Just hands. Hands are good. A lot of people work with their hands. Yeah, for pennies. For so much money you can't eat. I had to go to work, but I couldn't leave the conversation unfinished. On the other hand, I couldn't be late for school either. Mrs. Mercedes didn't like discipline. Look, we'll talk tonight, I said, getting up. I have to go to work. Sure, Mom, you go ahead. I'm going to get cleaned up. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. In the hallway, I turned around and saw Emiliano pulling a bottle of rum out of his bag. Is it morning already? I asked. It's not since this morning. He unscrewed the cap. It's been going on since last night. I couldn't concentrate at work. I scrubbed the classroom floors and thought about the fact that two grown men who don't work and drink all the time would now be living at home. What will that look like? How will we live in the same house? Senora Mercedes noticed my absent-mindedness. Patricia, are you all right? She asked me when I had mopped the same area of the floor for the third time. Yes, Mrs. Mercedes. I'm just a little tired. Maybe you need a day off. You look exhausted. No, I'm fine. I'll work. She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me. Senora Mercedes was an observant woman and always noticed when someone on the staff was in trouble. The day dragged on slowly. I cleaned the teacher's lounge, washed windows, and swept the schoolyard. Usually this work calmed me down. There was a kind of meditative, measured quality to it. But today, every movement was difficult. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Beatrice called. Patricia, where are you? She asked. At work. Why? Your sons have been in my store for an hour, buying beer and rum. People are starting to complain. Both of them? Both of them. Both drunk. Emiliano tells everyone what a bad wife he has, and Osvaldo tries to hit on the customers. My heart sank. Just this morning, Emiliano promised to clean up, and he's already drunk. Beatrice, I'm sorry. I can't do anything right now. I work until 4. I understand. I'm just saying it's not good. After that call, I completely lost my ability to concentrate. The director let me go half an hour early, saying she could see how bad I was feeling. I walked home slowly, delaying the moment of meeting my sons. On the way, I met my neighbor, Rosario, who was selling vegetables on the corner of our street. Patricia, she called out to me. Come here for a moment. Rosario was a woman in her 60s, a widow, living alone in a small house across the street from us. She knew all the neighborhood news and was never shy about sharing her opinion. What's wrong, Rosario? Your boys are being naughty again. She shook her head. Sitting on my porch all day today, drinking and yelling. Customers are afraid to come over. I'm sorry, Rosario. I'll talk to them. You will? She grinned. Patricia, you've been talking to them for 20 years. It's no use. What am I supposed to do? Kick them out of the house. Let them take care of themselves. You're not their mother anymore. You're just a free servant. I said goodbye to Rosario and went on my way. Her words were cruel but fair. Really, what am I doing? Providing for two grown men who don't want to work and don't respect me or my neighbors. When I reached our street, I saw my sons. They were indeed sitting on the porch of Rosario's house. They had empty bottles on the ground in front of them, and each had new bottles in their hands, only opened. Mom, shouted Osvaldo, noticing me. Come to us. Emiliano is telling me about his wife. Go home, I said sternly. Immediately. Why? Emiliano stood up, swaying. We're not disturbing anyone. We're just talking. You're disturbing the neighbors. Rosario complains that customers are afraid to come over. Don't let them, Osvaldo laughed. We're the good guys. I looked at them and realized that they were both very drunk. Their eyes were cloudy, their speech slurred, their movements uncertain. Emiliano was holding onto the porch railing to keep from falling. Home, I repeated, now. Okay, okay. Emiliano waved his hand. Come on, Osvaldo. Mommy says so. They got up and walked slowly toward our house. I followed, ready to pick them up if anyone fell. The neighbors looked out of their windows, watching this shameful procession. At home, my sons collapsed into their chairs and continued drinking. I tried to take the bottles away from them, but they wouldn't let me. Mom, stay out of it, Emiliano said. We're adults. We'll decide what we want to do. Grown-ups don't get drunk at 2 in the afternoon, I replied. What should we do? Osvaldo looked at me with a challenge. No work, no money, no entertainment. Only booze is left. We could look for work instead of drinking. Look for what? Emiliano laughed. Mom, you don't understand how life works. Without connections and money, no one will give you a job. Where do connections come from? From work. If you work well, people will recognize you and recommend you. That's a fairy tale, Osvaldo said. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. We were born in a poor family and we will remain poor. I listened to these conversations and realized that they justified their laziness and unwillingness to change anything. It is convenient to think that everything is the fault of circumstances and not your own actions. Then at least don't embarrass me in front of my neighbors, I asked. Drink at home, not on the street. Okay, Mom, Emiliano agreed. We'll drink at home. I went to prepare dinner, but I had no appetite. I cooked rice with vegetables and called my sons to the table. They came but didn't eat much. They just smeared the food on their plates. It's not good, said Osvaldo. Not enough salt. Salt it, I said. Why didn't you salt it right away? I didn't answer. It was useless to argue with drunks. After dinner, I put the dishes away and went to my room. I wanted to be alone to think about what was happening to my life. In the living room, my sons turned on the TV and continued drinking. At 10 p.m., I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. From the living room came voices, laughter, and the clinking of bottles. Then the voices got louder, and the laughter turned into swearing. You're an idiot, Emiliano shouted. A complete idiot. An idiot yourself, answered Osvaldo. You can't keep a wife, and you can't get a job. Fuck you! Then I heard the sound of breaking dishes, then another one. I got out of bed and walked quietly to the door. I opened it and looked out into the hallway. Something unimaginable was going on in the living room. The sons were pushing each other, shouting, throwing plates. There were splinters, spilled beer, and cigarette butts on the floor. Stop it! I shouted as I left the room. What are you doing? Stay out of this, Mom. Emiliano didn't even look in my direction. We're working things out. Keep it down. The neighbors are sleeping. We don't care about the neighbors, Osvaldo said and threw another plate against the wall. I tried to get between them, but Emiliano pushed me away. Go to bed, Mom. This is none of your business. This is my house, I shouted, and my dishes. Your house? Osvaldo stopped and looked at me. What are we, strangers? We are your sons. Sons don't act like hooligans. How are we supposed to behave? Emiliano sat back in his chair, breathing heavily. Like obedient boys? Mom, we're not 15 years old anymore. Then act like grown men. We are acting like men, Osvaldo grinned. We drink, we tell the truth, and we're not shy. I realized it was useless to talk to them. The alcohol had made them aggressive and deaf to any argument. I went back to the room and locked the door. The noise in the living room continued into the night. The sons were arguing, breaking dishes, turning the music up to full volume. I lay in bed and realized that I couldn't live like this anymore. At 1:30 in the morning, everything went quiet. Apparently, they had finally drunk themselves unconscious. I left the room and looked into the living room. Emiliano was asleep in a chair with his arms spread, and Osvaldo was lying on the sofa. There were splinters, bottles, and cigarette butts lying everywhere on the floor. I took a broom and began to clean up. I worked quietly so as not to wake my sons. I picked up the debris, wiped up the puddles, took out the trash. The kitchen was also in a terrible state. The sink was full of dirty dishes, beer was spilled on the table. The floor was full of crumbs and cigarette butts. It took me over an hour to clean. By the time I finished, it was almost 3 in the morning. I sat in the kitchen and cried. For the first time in years, I cried not out of pity for my sons, but out of pity for myself. What had I done wrong? Where had I gone wrong? Maybe Beatrice was right and I had let them do too much? Maybe I should have been stricter, more demanding. But it was too late to fix things. My sons were grown, my character was formed, my habits were ingrained, and now I had to live with the consequences of my decisions. At 4 in the morning, I finally went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. My mind was reeling with bits and pieces of conversations, pictures of the mess in the living room, the words of Rosario and Beatrice. They all said the same thing, that it couldn't go on like this. But what could I do? Kick my sons out of the house? Refuse to help them? How could a mother do that? And where would they go? Emiliano's wife won't let him go home. Osvaldo has no place of his own. I lay in the dark and realized I was trapped. A mother's love had become a burden that was dragging me and them down, but I didn't know how to break out of this trap. Saturday began as usual. I got up at 7 in the morning, made coffee, and sat in the kitchen, enjoying the rare moments of silence. My sons were still asleep. The house was quiet. I planned to spend the day at home, doing laundry, cooking for the week, maybe stopping by the market for groceries. In the week of living together, Emiliano and Osvaldo had established a certain routine. They would wake up around noon, eat breakfast that I left on the table, then go out until evening. Sometimes they came back sober, sometimes drunk, but so far no major incidents. I hoped that after that night's fight they had learned to be quieter. At 10 in the morning, Osvaldo woke up. He came into the kitchen in his underwear, scratching and yawning. "Mom, is there any coffee?" he asked, sitting down at the table. "There's some left in the pot. Pour yourself some." He poured coffee into a cup and added a lot of sugar. His face was puffy, his eyes red. I guess last night's drinking was still taking its toll. "Listen, Mom," he said, stirring his coffee. "Can we stay home today? The weather's crappy. I don't feel like going out." I looked out the window. It was a cloudy day indeed, drizzling with light rain. But I didn't like the idea of my sons being home all day. It usually ended up with drinking and noise. "Of course you can," I replied. "Just be quiet. I have things to do at home. We won't do anything special, we'll just watch TV and talk." An hour later, Emiliano woke up. He looked even worse than his brother. His face was gray, his hands were trembling. He sat down at the table, poured himself a cup of coffee, and lit a cigarette. "Have you been smoking since morning?" I asked him. "I have a headache," he mumbled. "I need to cheer up." "Maybe you should drink less?" "Mom, don't lecture me in the morning," he puffed irritably. "I'm in a bad mood as it is." I didn't say anything. It was useless to argue with him in such a state. It was better to wait until he was finally awake and a little more lucid. At 11 in the morning, I went to the market to buy groceries. I didn't have much money, so I bought only the essentials: rice, potatoes, chicken, bread. Meat would be enough for 2 days at the most, but there was no other way out. At the market, I met my neighbor Rosario, who was selling vegetables. "Patricia, how are you?" she asked. "Your boys were noisy again last night." "I'm sorry, Rosario, I'll talk to them." "You will," she shook her head. "How much talking can we do? Maybe it's time to take action." "What kind of action?" "Complain to the police, have them officially warned." The thought of complaining about my own children to the police seemed monstrous to me. How can a mother denounce her sons? "No, Rosario, I'll take care of it myself." "Well, suit yourself," she shrugged. "Only people don't have infinite patience." I got home around noon. My sons were sitting in the living room watching TV and drinking beer. There were already empty bottles on the table. "Where did the beer come from?" I asked. "Osvaldo went to the store," Emiliano answered, keeping his eyes on the screen. "With what money?" "I borrowed it from Pablito," said Osvaldo. "I'll pay him back tonight." I sighed. More debts, more promises of repayment. The circle never ended. "Listen," I said, setting the bags on the floor. "Let's make a deal. If you drink at home, you drink quietly. No yelling, no fighting, no breaking dishes." "Sure, Mom," Emiliano agreed. "We are not animals. And don't play music too loud. The neighbors are complaining." All right," said Osvaldo. "We'll be like mice." I went into the kitchen and started cooking dinner. I could hear voices from the television and sometimes the laughter of my sons. So far, everything was quiet. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door and saw 4 men on the threshold. All of them I knew by sight. They were friends of my sons. "Hello, Aunt Patricia," said Pablito, the oldest of the group. "Are the boys home?" "At home," I answered reluctantly. "May I join them?" Pablito was in his 30s, unmarried, working as a longshoreman somewhere. The other 3 were about the same age: Herman, Carlos, and the Fernando that Osvaldo had mentioned in his drunken delirium. All four of them looked like people who had long since given up on life. "Come in," I said, though I tensed inwardly. The guests went into the living room where they were greeted by the cheers of my sons. I went back to the kitchen but left the door ajar so I could hear what was going on. "Hey guys!" shouted Osvaldo. "How's it going?" "Fine," Pablito answered. "We thought we'd stop by and see how you're doing." "I live like a king," laughed Osvaldo. "Mom feeds, dresses." "You are lucky," said Herman. "We have to take care of ourselves." "What did you bring?" Emiliano asked. "Rum and beer," Carlos answered. "There's enough for everyone." I heard the sound of bottles opening and I knew it was starting. Usually when this group got together, it ended in a drunken brawl. At first it was quiet. The men were talking, laughing, discussing some common acquaintances. I continued cooking in the kitchen, hoping that this time everything would be peaceful. But by 4 o'clock the voices were louder, the laughter more raucous. Someone turned up the music, softly at first, then harder and harder. "Turn it down," I asked, looking out into the living room. "Of course, Aunt Patricia," Pablito said, and turned it down. But half an hour later, the music was back at full volume. Some of the company tried to sing along to the song, but it was false and disgusting. I went out into the living room again. 6 men were sitting in armchairs and on the floor, empty bottles lying around, and an ashtray full of cigarette butts on the table. The air was thick with tobacco smoke. "Guys," I said louder to block out the music, "the neighbors will complain. Turn it down." "Mom, don't move," Oswaldo said, and there was a drunken edge to his voice. "We're sitting at home, not bothering anyone." "Ah, yes, you are. The music is very loud." "Aunt Patricia," Fernando intervened. "We don't get together every day. Once a week we can have fun. Have fun, but keep it down." "What's quieter?" Herman got up from the floor, swaying. "Are we in a church? Is this a house or a convent?" Emiliano laughed at the joke, and the others picked up on it. I realized that they were all drunk enough already, and it was useless to negotiate with them. "All right," I said, "but be done by 8 o'clock at night. I have to get up early tomorrow." 8 o'clock? Carlos was indignant. "We're just getting started." "Mom?" Osvaldo looked at me with annoyance. "Don't boss me around. We're adults. We'll decide when we're done." I went back to the kitchen, but I knew it was going to be a rough evening. Behind the wall, the noise was growing by the minute. The music was joined by shouting, clapping hands, and stomping feet. Apparently, someone was trying to dance. At 6 p.m., I couldn't stand it any longer and went out into the living room again. What I saw was beyond my worst expectations. The furniture was displaced. Not only bottles were lying on the floor, but also the remains of the food they had gotten from somewhere. The ashtrays were overflowing, ashes falling onto the carpet. Pablito danced on the coffee table, swinging a bottle. "That's it!" I shouted. "That's enough! That's enough! What are you yelling for?" Emiliano stood up and swayed. "We're not doing anything wrong." "You've torn up the whole living room. The neighbors are complaining. Enough already." "Who asked you?" Herman said. "Isn't this your house?" "This is my house," I said firmly. "And I'm asking you to leave." "Listen, Auntie." Carlos came closer to me. "Stay out of men's business. Go to the kitchen and make borscht." "I'm not an aunt. I'm the lady of the house, and I demand that you leave." At that moment, Emiliano grabbed my hand. His fingers were hot and sticky, squeezing my hand so hard that it hurt. "Mom," he said, and there was anger in his voice. "Don't embarrass yourself. Go to your room and stay out of our way." "Let go of me." I tried to get free, but he held me tight. "I won't let go until you promise to stay out of my way." "Emiliano, you're hurting me. And you're hurting us with your moralizing." He dragged me toward the door, and I realized he was going to push me out of the living room. I struggled. I tried to get away, but he was stronger. "Emiliano, stop! What are you doing?" What I should have done a long time ago. He pulled me to the threshold. "We've had enough of you and your complaints." "That's right!" suddenly shouted Osvaldo. "Mom, you're a burden on our house. You're a nuisance." These words hit me like a slap in the face. Oswaldo, my youngest son, whom I raised, fed, clothed, called me a burden. "What did you say?" I asked, not believing my ears. "I told the truth." He stood up and came over to us. "You are always whining, complaining, forbidding. We're tired of you." Osvaldo, this is my home. I feed you, I clothe you. And we didn't ask you to, he shouted. We didn't ask for your care. We can take care of ourselves. Then go take care of yourself, I shouted back. Get out of my house! It's not your house! Osvaldo was furious. This is our family home, and we're not going anywhere. But you can go! What? You heard him! He came right up to me. Go away! We don't want to see you anymore! I looked at my sons and didn't recognize them. They were strangers, angry and drunk, kicking me out of my own home. You can't kick me out, I said, trying to speak calmly. This is my house. We can! Emiliano was still holding my hand. And we will! He dragged me toward the front door. Osvaldo followed. The drinking companion stood in the living room, watching the scene with curiosity, as if it were a play. Emiliano, let go! I tried to resist, but he was much stronger. I won't let go. We've had enough of you. Get out of here. He dragged me to the front door and opened it. It was drizzling outside, cold and damp. Emiliano, I'm wearing slippers. It's raining outside. None of our business. He shoved me in the back, and I found myself on the porch. Sons, what are you doing? I turned to them. I'm your mother. You're not our mother anymore, shouted Osvaldo. You are our enemy. Go away and don't come back. The door slammed in my face. I was alone on the porch in the rain, in my bathrobe and slippers. Outside the door, the music started up again, drunken voices and laughter. I stood there for a few minutes, not realizing what had happened. My own children had kicked me out of the house. The sons I had born and raised had called me a burden and an enemy. The rain intensified, and I realized I had to go somewhere. The only place where I could be sheltered was Beatrice's house. I walked down the street, slapping through the puddles in my house slippers. It was about a 15-minute walk to Beatrice's house. I walked slowly, pondering what had happened. Is this really how my motherly love ends? Did years of caring and sacrifice result in my children kicking me out of the house? Beatrice lived in a small house behind the store. When I knocked on the door, she opened it almost immediately. Patricia! She exclaimed when she saw me wet and disheveled. What's wrong? My sons kicked me out of the house, I said and cried. Beatrice dragged me into the house, gave me a towel and dry clothes. She sat me in the kitchen and made tea. Tell me, she said, when I had calmed down a little. I told her everything, the drunkenness, the drinking, the way my sons had called me a burden and pushed me out into the street. Bastards, Beatrice said when I was done. Real bastards. Beatrice, these are my children. Children? She snorted. Children don't do that. They're monsters you raised yourself. What am I supposed to do now? Nothing, Beatrice replied. Stay here until they sober up. Then we'll see. What if they don't want me home? Then we'll go to the police. The house is in your name. They have no right to kick you out. We sat in the kitchen until late at night, talking about life, about children, about how things had changed. Beatrice talked about her problems with her ex-husband. I talked about my sons. You know, she said before going to bed, maybe it's for the best. Maybe now you'll finally realize you've had enough. What do you mean? I mean, it's time to stop sacrificing yourself for ungrateful children. It's time to live for yourself. I went to bed on the sofa in Beatrice's living room, but I couldn't sleep. My mind was reeling with the events of the day, the words of my sons, their angry faces. How could it be that my children had turned into such people? Where did I go wrong? But gradually, anger began to join the pain. Yes, they are my sons, but that doesn't give them the right to treat me like this. I've devoted my life to them, and they call me a burden. Maybe Beatrice is right and it's time for a change. I stayed with Beatrice for 2 weeks. I went to work in the morning and came back to her house at night. I slept on her living room couch, used her clothes, ate at her table. Beatrice never complained, but I could see she was uncomfortable. She had her own life, her own habits, and now she had a lodger. In the first few days, I walked by my house every evening, hoping to see my sons on the porch, to talk to them. But the windows were always curtained, and voices and music came from the house. Several times I went to the door and knocked, but no one opened the door. Either they didn't hear me, or they didn't want to hear me. On the 4th day, Beatrice's neighbor Rosario came into the store. Beatrice, she said, buying bread. Where is Patricia? I haven't seen her for days. She's staying with me for now, Beatrice replied. Trouble at home. Ah, I see, Rosario nodded. I thought maybe she'd gone somewhere else. There's a lot going on at her house. What's going on? Every day there's drinking, shouting, fighting, playing music till dawn. Yesterday the police came, the neighbors complained. I was sitting in the corner of the store sorting out the goods and I heard this conversation. My heart clenched. It meant my sons had turned my house into a brothel. All my fears were realized. What did the police do? Beatrice asked. Nothing much. We talked to them, warned them, but it was no use. The next day it was the same thing again. After Rosario left, Beatrice came to me. Did you hear that? I heard. They're using my house as a beer hall. Patricia, you have to do something. You can't leave it like this. What can I do? They won't let me in. You can go to the police. The house is yours. You have the papers. But I couldn't bring myself to go to the police and complain about my own children. No matter how badly they behaved, they were still my sons. A few days later, the situation got worse. Senora Mercedes approached me at school. Patricia, she said, calling me into her office, is everything okay at home? Why do you ask? I got a call from the neighborhood. They say there are constant disturbances in your house. Is that true? I felt my face getting red, so my son's shame has even reached the school. Mrs. Mercedes, I have a temporary family problem. I'll take care of them. Patricia, I understand that everyone has family problems, but being a school teacher requires a certain reputation. If your house becomes a place of constant scandal, I'll have to take action. What kind of action? As a last resort dismissal. I don't want to do that. You're a good worker, but the school's reputation is important too. That conversation finally killed me. Because of my son's behavior, I could lose my only job. And without a job, what would I do? What would I live on? That evening, I told Beatrice about it. You see, she said, what your softness leads to. Now you could be out of work because of them. But what can I do? Go to the police, file a report, give them a formal warning, or even arrest them for a few days. Maybe then they'll understand. Beatrice, I can't. They're my children. Your children don't think of you as a mother anymore. Do you remember what they used to yell at you? That you were their enemy? Yes, I remember those words. They burned my soul every day, but I still couldn't bring myself to go to the police. The days dragged on and on. Work, Beatrice's house, sleeping on the couch. I felt homeless, superfluous, unwanted. All my life I'd been a mother, and now what was I? Just a 52-year-old woman with no family and no home. Sometimes in the evenings I would walk to my house and stand across the street, staring at the lighted windows. Inside, music played. Voices were heard. My life continued there without me. The sons got along just fine without their mother, whom they considered a burden. On the 10th day, my neighbor Martha, who lived next to my house, met me outside Beatrice's store. Patricia, she said, what's going on in your house? What do you mean? Some people live there. Different faces every day, all drunk. Your sons are hardly seen, and the house has become a thoroughfare. What kind of people? I don't know. Young men, all dirty, all drunk. They come, they drink, they fight, they leave. Sometimes they spend the night. The neighbors are afraid to let their kids out. It was worse than I thought. So my sons aren't just drinking at home. They're letting everyone in. My house has become a hangout for vagrants and alcoholics. What do my sons do? They drink with them too. Yesterday I saw Osvaldo fighting with a stranger in the yard. He was covered in blood. I imagined it and felt my legs go weak. My youngest son, the one I raised, turned into a street fighter. Patricia, Martha put her hand on my shoulder. You have to do something. You can't go on like this. I know it can't, but I don't know what. Go to the police, get them all thrown out. But I still couldn't make up my mind. On the 12th day, an event happened that changed everything. I was walking home from work as usual. I passed the central square, where there were stands with newspapers, cigarettes, and lottery tickets. I usually passed by without stopping. I never had money for lotteries, but that day something made me go to the kiosk. Uncle Fernando, I said to the clerk whom I had known for years, how much does a lottery ticket cost? 5,000 pesos, he replied. Would you like a taste of happiness? 5,000 pesos was almost half of my daily earnings. Money I needed badly. But something inside was pushing me to buy this ticket. Give me one, I said, pulling a crumpled bill out of my wallet. What number do you want? Any number, you choose. Uncle Fernando took out a ticket numbered 712345. I took the ticket, put it in my bag, and went on my way, already regretting the money I had spent. The ticket had been in my bag for 3 days. I even forgot about it. On Wednesday evening, when Beatrice and I were sitting in the kitchen drinking tea, the lottery results came on the radio. The winning numbers for today's draw, said the announcer, 71, 23, 45. Beatrice, I said, I have a lottery ticket. So? The numbers are the same as they said on the radio. Beatrice looked at me in disbelief. Are you sure? I took the ticket out of my bag and checked the numbers. They were a perfect match. Beatrice, I said in a shaky voice, I think I've won. How much? I looked at the ticket where the fine print said, the grand prize is $670,000. $670,000, I whispered. Beatrice dropped the cup. The tea spilled all over the table, but she didn't notice. Are you kidding? Eli NC for yourself. She took the ticket, checked the numbers several times against the ones on the radio. Patricia, she said, her voice trembling, you have won $670,000. We sat there looking at each other, unable to believe what was happening. $670,000 was more than I could make in the rest of my life. It was money that could change everything. What do we do now? I asked. Tomorrow we go to the lottery office and get the money, Beatrice said practically. But first hide the ticket in a safe place. I tucked the ticket into a secret pocket in my bag. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch and thought about what the winnings meant. Now I could buy my own house. I could be independent of my sons. I could live the life I wanted. In the morning, we drove to the regional center, to the main office of the lottery. There they checked the ticket, confirmed the win, and said that the money would be transferred to my account within a week. Congratulations, said the office clerk. You have become one of the biggest winners of the year. Can I keep my name out of the press? I asked. Unfortunately, no. We are required by law to publicize big wins. And indeed, the next day, the local newspaper published an article. Patricia Vargas, a resident of our town, won $670,000 in the lottery. The article was accompanied by a photo of me, which was taken at the lottery office. The news spread through the city with incredible speed. People stopped me on the street, congratulated me, asked for autographs. I became a local celebrity. On the third day after the announcement of the win, a newspaper reporter came to my house. That is, to Beatrice. Senora Vargas, he said, can I interview you? People want to know how you're going to spend that kind of money. I haven't thought about it yet, I answered honestly. How did you feel when you heard about the winnings? I couldn't believe it at first. I thought I was wrong. How did your family react? This question stumped me. What family are we talking about? Sons who kicked me out of the house and called me a burden? The family is happy, I said vaguely. Do you have plans for the future? I want to buy a house, live in peace. The interview was short, but the next day it was published on the front page of the newspaper under the headline, Happiness Came to the Humble Worker. After the interview was published, the number of people who wanted to talk to me increased many times over. Someone simply congratulated me. Someone asked for a loan. Someone suggested profitable investments. I realized that being rich is not only a joy, but also a challenge. Beatrice took on the role of my secretary and security guard. She filtered visitors, answered the phone, and protected me from particularly persistent solicitors. Patricia, she said a week after I won, you need to be careful. Money changes people. Those who didn't notice you before will now be your best friends, and those who were close can become enemies. You mean your sons? I mean them too. They don't know you won yet, do they? I don't know. Maybe someone told them. They'll find out sooner or later, and that's when the fun begins. I realized Beatrice was right. The sons who called me a burden and threw me out of the house would probably change their attitude when they found out about the money. But then what should I do? Forgive them and become a cash cow again, or do something different? Money really did change everything. Now I had the opportunity to live independently, not to depend on anyone, not to suffer humiliation. But did I have the power to seize this opportunity? Every day I received dozens of calls and letters. People asked me to help with money, offered investments, invited me to visit. The mayor sent an official congratulatory letter and invited me to a reception at City Hall. Patricia, neighbors told me, you are now the richest woman in the city. How does that feel? To be honest, I didn't feel rich yet. The money hadn't come in yet. I was still living with Beatrice, wearing her clothes, eating at her table. Wealth was still only on paper. But by now, I realized that my life had changed forever. Now I could buy a house, a car, beautiful clothes. I could travel, study, do what I liked. I no longer had to suffer humiliation for a piece of bread. The only thing that bothered me was my sons. When they found out they'd won, what would they do? Will they apologize, demand money, try to bring me home? And most importantly, what will I do? Forgive them and go back to being a caring mother? Or would I take the chance to start a new life without them? I didn't know the answer to these questions yet, but I felt that soon I would have to make a choice that would determine the rest of my life. The money arrived in my account a week after the paperwork was completed. $670,000, an amount I couldn't even imagine. When the bank clerk showed me the account statement, I counted the zeros several times, not believing my eyes. The first thing I decided to do was to buy a house. I didn't want to depend on someone else's kindness, to live on Beatrice's couch, even though she never once let me know that I was bothering her. But every person should have their own place. The realtor, a young woman named Carmen, showed me houses in different parts of town. At first, I looked at modest one-story houses, similar to the one I used to live in, but Carmen convinced me to look at something better. Senora Vargas, she said, you now have the opportunity to live beautifully. Why not take advantage of it? So we arrived in the Las Palmas neighborhood, where the wealthiest people in the city lived. The houses there were large, with manicured gardens, high fences, and security guards. I felt out of place in my simple dress in the midst of all this luxury. This is the house, Carmen said, stopping in front of a two-story building with white walls and a red tile roof. The owner is moving to the capital, selling urgently. The house was really beautiful. On the first floor, there was a living room, kitchen, dining room, and office. On the second, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. In the yard grew palm trees and flowering shrubs. There was a small swimming pool. How much is it worth? I asked. $80,000. But I think we can bargain. $80,000 was more than I'd planned to spend. But I liked the house so much that I decided to go for it. I'll take it, I said. Carmen looked at me in surprise. Are you sure? Maybe you should think about it some more. I'm sure. A week later, all the paperwork was done, and I was the owner of a 2-story house in the best part of town. When the realtor handed me the keys, I felt a strange sensation, as if my old life had ended and a new one had begun. The next purchase was a car. I had never driven, but I decided it was time to learn. The car dealership offered me expensive new cars, but I chose a used Toyota, reliable, easy to drive. Do you need an instructor? The salesman asked. Yes, of course. My son-in-law gives driving lessons. He's a good specialist. He'll teach you in a month. So my driving lessons began. The instructor, Don Rafael, was a patient middle-aged man. He was not surprised that a woman my age decided to learn to drive. It's never too late to start a new life, he said. The main thing is not to be afraid. I moved into my new house 2 weeks after I bought it. Beatrice helped me pack. There wasn't much to pack. Over the years, I had accumulated almost nothing of value. All my possessions fit into 2 suitcases. Well, said Beatrice as we drove into the courtyard of the new house, now you're really rich. It's strange, I said. I'm not used to such luxury. You'll get used to it. Just don't forget your old friends. The house was partially furnished. The previous owners had left the main furniture. I only had to buy linens, dishes, and groceries. The first night, I lay in the big bedroom on the second floor and listened to the silence. No one could be heard. No drunken voices, no swearing, no breaking of dishes. For the first time in many years, I could sleep peacefully. The first days in the new house passed like a fairy tale. I explored all the rooms, tried cooking on the new stove, took a bath in the huge bathroom. In the yard, I tended to the flowers that were left by the previous owners. The neighbors said hello, but kept their distance. Apparently, they hadn't decided what kind of person I was. But the peace did not last long. On the 5th day of life in the new house, I got a call from Emiliano. Mom? I heard a familiar voice. It made my heart race. So my sons found out about my winnings and found my phone number. Yes, it's me. Mom, it's Emiliano. How's it going? There was a note in his voice that I knew well, ingratiating, begging. That's what he sounded like when he needed something. I'm good. How are you? I'm fine. Hey, Mom, I heard you won the lottery. Is that true? It's true. Wow, congratulations. How much did you win? Enough to live on. Mom, can I get some help? I have a health problem that needs to be treated. This is it, I thought. They just found out about the money and they're already asking for it. What kind of problems? Liver pain. The doctor said I need a checkup medicine. I don't have any money. Emiliano, why does your liver hurt? Well, probably from stress. You know how we live. I knew why his liver hurt. It's from drinking all the time. And what he needs to treat it isn't medication, it's cessation. How much do you need? Not much. $50,000. I'll pay you back as soon as I get better and get a job. $50,000 isn't much? That amount of money didn't seem real to me before. Now I could give that money without even noticing the loss. But something stopped me. Emiliano, where do you live now? In our house. I mean your house. Is Osvaldo with you? Yes, of course. Mom, we're very sorry about what happened the other day. We were drunk. We weren't thinking straight. We're sorry. So you don't drink now? Almost never. Sometimes just a beer. I knew he was lying. The neighbors said there was still drinking going on in the house. Emiliano, I'll think about the money. Mom, I need it now. I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I'll think about it and call you back. Mom, please, I'm your son. That's why I'll think about it. I hung up and my hands were shaking. So this is it. Now they're gonna call, they're gonna beg, they're gonna demand. Calling me a mother when they need money and a burden when they don't. The next day, Osvaldo called. Mom, hi! His voice sounded fake cheerful. How are you doing in your new home? I'm doing fine. That's great. And we miss you here. The house isn't the same without you. Osvaldo, you said I was a burden. Mom, come on. We were drunk and talking nonsense. You know we love you. I know. What do you want? Nothing special. I just wanted to talk to my mom. By the way, Emiliano said you promised him money for his treatment. I didn't. I said I'd think about it. Can I have some? I'm in trouble too. What kind of problems? I can't find a job, and without money there's nothing to look for. I need a decent suit, documents to restore. 20,000 would be enough. Money again. It's always money. Osvaldo, what's the condition of the house? It's fine. We clean it. We keep it clean. And those people who drink at your place? What people? Mom, we said we don't drink much. That's a lie, a big lie. They haven't changed. They're just acting remorseful. I'll think about it, I said and hung up. The calls became regular. It was Emiliano or Osvaldo asking for money every day. For treatment, for work, for food. They said different amounts from $5,000 to $100,000. I refused them all, and with each refusal, their voices became more and more irritated. Mom, Emiliano said after another refusal, you know we are your children. Who are you going to help if not us? To those who really need it, I answered. And we don't? You need treatment for alcoholism, not money. He usually hung up after saying that. Osvaldo was more direct. Mom, he said during one of the calls, are we your sons or not? If we are, then help. If not yours, say so. You are my sons, I replied. But there are different kinds of help. Sometimes it's better not to help than to help. What kind of philosophy is that? He got angry. You have $1 million and you can't give your sons 1,000. Not $1 million, 670,000. And I could give them, but I won't. Why not? Because you'll spend it on booze. We won't. Yes, you will. Just like you've been spending my paycheck all these years. The calls got more frequent. Sometimes they called several times a day. I stopped answering strange numbers. Then they started calling from different phones. After a month of this siege, the thing I feared happened. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, voices were heard in the yard. I looked out the window and saw my sons. They were standing at the front door, both obviously drunk. Emiliano was shouting something, waving his arms. Osvaldo was swaying beside him. I didn't open the door. I hoped they'd yell and leave, but they started banging on the door, then pounding with their fists. Mom, Emiliano yelled, we know you're home! Open up! Open up now! Shouted Osvaldo. We are your children. The knocking grew louder and louder. The neighbors started looking out of their windows. I was embarrassed. I had just moved to a decent neighborhood, and this was such a scandal. Mom! Emiliano kicked at the door. If you don't open the door, we'll break it down. Break it! Osvaldo encouraged him. It's our mother. She should let us in. I realized that the door might not hold. I had to do something. Call the police? But how could I explain that it was my own children? The knocking stopped, and I thought they'd gone. But a minute later, I heard the sound of wood breaking. They were really starting to break down the door. I ran around the house, not knowing what to do. Then I remembered that there was a back door. A door in the kitchen that led to the backyard. That's where my car was parked. I quickly grabbed my car keys and my bag of papers, quietly walked out the back door into the yard. Fortunately, my sons were focused on the main entrance and didn't notice me. I got into the car and started the engine. Even though I had only been learning to drive for a month, all the skills came to mind in an emergency. But when I got to the gate, somehow Osvaldo was there. He must have heard the sound of the engine and ran around the house. Stop! He shouted, waving his arms. Mom, stop! He stood right in front of the car, blocking the road. I stopped, not knowing what to do. Should I honk? But then I'd attract even more attention from the neighbors. Mom, get out! Osvaldo came right up to the car. We need to talk! I tried to pass him, but he was moving with the car, so I decided to drive slowly forward, hoping he'd back off. But Osvaldo was too drunk to think. When the car started, he didn't back up, but instead put his hands on the hood. It all happened very quickly. I stepped on the gas a little harder, and Osvaldo lost his footing and fell. The car hit him, and I braked immediately. He was lying on the ground, moaning and holding his leg. Emiliano came running and started screaming, You hit your son! You hit Osvaldo! I was shocked at what had happened. I never thought I'd come to this point, that I'd hit my own child with a car. Osvaldo, are you okay? I shouted from the car. My leg hurts! He moaned. Mom, you hit me! Emiliano helped him up. Osvaldo stood with a limp on one leg, but he could walk. That's it. Now you're going to answer for it, Emiliano shouted. Call an ambulance. Call the police. But I didn't call an ambulance or the police. Instead, I started the car and drove myself. I drove to the police station, which was in the next street. The officer on duty, Sergeant Rodriguez, knew me by sight. The whole lottery thing had made me famous in town. Senora Vargas, he said when he saw me. What happened? There are thieves in my house, I said, trying to speak calmly. They are breaking down the door, trying to get in. Thieves? In the Las Palmas neighborhood? He was surprised. Where exactly? I gave him the address of my new house. All right. We'll send a unit right away. Where were you? I went to the store. I came back and they were breaking down the door. How many? 2. Young men, drunk. I see. Stay here. We'll take you home with the squad. 10 minutes later, we were on our way to my house. Me in the police car, a car with 2 officers in front. My heart was racing, but I knew I was doing the right thing. When we pulled up, my sons were still in the yard. The door was broken. They had already broken into the house. Through the windows, you could see them looking for something inside. Freeze! Police! Shouted the officers as they got out of the car. Emiliano and Osvaldo ran out of the house. When they saw the police, they tried to run away, but they were quickly apprehended. We didn't do anything, Emiliano shouted. This is our mother's house. They were looking for money, I told Sergeant Rodriguez. They thought I was keeping the winnings at home. I see, he nodded. We'll file it as a home invasion. They took my sons to the station. I was alone by the broken door of my new house. The neighbors gradually dispersed, realizing that the show was over. I went into the house and saw that they were really looking for money. They'd gone through all the drawers, turned over furniture, thrown things around. They probably thought I was keeping cash at home. Sitting in the midst of this chaos, I realized I had done the right thing. My sons had become strangers to me. They were willing to break down the door, rob, hurt for money. A mother's love is no excuse for such behavior. I'll file a complaint with the court tomorrow. Let them sit in jail and think about their lives. Maybe it will help them realize they need to change. Maybe it won't. But I will no longer sacrifice myself for ungrateful children.